It's not just wishy-washy thinking like, oh, it makes me feel good, or I had a vision. I saw something and I felt something. Okay, fine, seeing, feeling it. Everyone can claim that, right? I mean, even a person who has mental illness might say they saw lots of visions and heard lots of voices, right? It doesn't mean that that's the truth, right?
And the problem is with scientism is if you just look up the term and the philosophy behind it, it's actually a misuse of science. So science is it has a framework. And the framework really is that you're looking into the how of the world, and the underlying principle is there are no non-natural explanations. Every explanation has to be a natural explanation, and that also is his Achilles heel. This is a limitation of this tool. So if you're looking for something that's supernatural, science won't work. Because there's an underlying fundamental principle that precludes that. What's your position in terms
I was explaining to Abbas that I feel at the moment I'm an atheist, but I've really enjoyed this discussion. I feel it's been so interesting hearing, because like I said, I don't speak to my friends very often at the moment, but it's been so interesting hearing, I suppose, what drives you and what you have faith in. It's very interesting.
You know what it is, Jacob? I mean, being born here, Dr. Iman being born here, we went through the Western education, Western life. Many of us questioned. My parents are Muslim.
Thank you very much.
My parents are Muslim. Why should I be Muslim? Because science seems to have all the answers, etc., etc. And we went through these, you could call them crises, or you could call them just times in our life when we questioned lots of things. And most of us that I speak to, especially those who are actually speaking to others about Islam, went through that journey themselves. And they asked those questions, they investigated, they really scrutinized. And it was based upon reason and evidence. That's what I always say.
Okay.
It's not just wishy-washy thinking like, oh, it makes me feel good, or I had a vision. I saw something and I felt something. Okay, fine, seeing, feeling it. Everyone can claim that, right? I mean, even a person who has mental illness might say they saw lots of visions and heard lots of voices, right? It doesn't mean that that's the truth, right? So Allah says something very, very interesting in the Quran. Allah says, if they speak the truth, bring your evidence against the Quran, against Islam. So it's about evidence. But here's our evidence. These are the reasons why we believe it. You provide your counter evidence. And because when a person does that with good faith, then the stronger evidence will be the one that should convince them, right? So the Quran is confident in that. Quran also says, had this book come from anyone other than your Lord, surely within it you would have found many contradictions and errors. So it's giving you a falsification test.
I see.
It's saying, look, if this isn't from God, then you would have found contradictions and errors. The fact that you don't find those contradictions and errors signifies that it probably wasn't from a human being. It's not man-made.
I see.
And there's so many other factors.
one of the things, just on the growing up in the UK, and
of course,
the schooling system, it does something specific to most people, especially if you go down the science route. It socializes you into scientism. And scientism is taking science to be the only valid way of ascertaining truth, or reality. And the problem is with scientism is if you just look up the term and the philosophy behind it, it's actually a misuse of science. So science is it has a framework. And the framework really is that you're looking into the how of the world, and the underlying principle is there are no non-natural explanations. Every explanation has to be a natural explanation. And that also is his Achilles heel. This is a limitation of this tool. So if you're looking for something that's supernatural, science won't work. Because there's an underlying fundamental principle that precludes that. So one of the things that I had to sort of unlearn was this concept that we're socialized into, because science is attractive and we've discovered all these things. It works really well. We can make lots of predictions with it. We can apply it and use it in medicine, etc. Whatever we're doing. But that does not mean that it can be used ubiquitously. We can't use it for everything. And learning to differentiate this framework and where we can use it and where we can't use it, this is a really important thing that we have to come to. So one example would be things like aesthetic things. We can't use science to tell things like beauty or value, like as in moral value, or even moral choices. Science can't make those choices.
Okay.
The example would be if you make a cake, science can tell you the ingredients, maybe how long it was baked for, the process involved,
Yes.
how many people were involved, but it can't tell you what that cake is for, why it was made. You know, it can tell you that there was some icing on it and the icing spells this, but it won't tell you that there was somebody who's made this cake for someone they like. There's a bigger picture to this that you're not find from the science.
Right.
So often we're sort of socialized into this, the how is the same as the why, and that's not right. So you guys are, human beings, moral agents. You have the ability to appreciate things like value in each other, value in the world around you.
Yes.
Those things, you can't anchor them in the material.
Okay.
There has to be something outside of the material to anchor it in.
Right.
Now it was a long journey. I mean, I was one of these people that Bart is talking about. Because you go into that field, this becomes your way of thinking. But actually, there's a much bigger picture to this.
Of course. Yeah.
So to know your why is probably important. Why are you here? What is your purpose?
Yes.
And then what the corollary of that is where you're going to. Because I'm sort of a dualist. I don't think that my body is me.
Okay.
There's something beyond that.
Right.
There's lots of reasons to go into to think about that.
I see.
And many cultures hold this idea, and that there is something about the human being which is going to survive the death process.
Yes.
That's a big topic.
Yeah,
Of course it is. Yeah.
So there are a lot of things like this. But the key thing is that this misuse of science, making it a ubiquitous tool to work out how reality is.
Yes.
And I think if you do that, it takes you to a dark place.
I was going to say earlier on as well, because this is what I said to my friend. My friend is also religious, and
to put you up to speed, his friend's Muslim, by the way.
Okay,
So
yes, but this, funny enough, this is another friend. We've got a really diverse group we have, yeah. But anyway, so this friend, we had this chat, and what I said to him was, what I suppose is probably interesting is a lot of things with science based on theory. Yeah. I suppose you could equate a theory to a faith that you have in a religion. I suppose those you could view on an equal wavelength.
I think the thing is, science definitely is a useful tool.
Yes.
It does help us to understand how things are working and what have you. And I think a lot of the theories are very well established. And I don't like to sort of knock science. I think science is a great tool that Allah has given us in order to discover the world.
Yes.
But I think Dr. Imran's point was that because it operates on the axiom of philosophical naturalism, we can't use that philosophical naturalistic explanation for the metaphysical. So, like you said, meaning of love, meaning of affection. Why should your mother get old and you still look after her? Scientifically, she's old. She can't produce or provide or do anything. Actually, to give her resources would actually be illogical.
Right.
But we don't think like that clearly.
Yes, yeah.
So what is it that's beyond that, physical, purely scientific analysis of everything? And there's something else, what Imran is saying, that goes way beyond that, which is the metaphysical, which is something that we can't really answer with science.
Yeah. Okay.
Have you heard of Thomas Kuhn?
Say it again, sorry.
Thomas Kuhn?
No, I don't think so, no.
He was a physicist, and then he did philosophy. He wrote a book about scientific revolutions. And to summarise the book in one sentence, basically what he was trying it's on your points of the theory.
Yeah.
And what he was saying is that the way that science changes, the way we develop our theories, is that there has to be a consensus among the scholars that we're thinking about this thing wrong, and then the thinking changes. So it's almost like a social endeavour, but you have to break the underlying dogma.
Yes.
And there are lots of things where there is dogma within science, and it takes a lot to break it.
Right.
Steady state theory until the 1940s, and it was changed by Einstein. And there are many examples of this sort of thing. So what he was saying is that the conclusions that we make about the observations that we see are based upon the pre-theory you're talking about. But if we change our pre-theory, our conclusions will change as well.
Okay.
So you get that phrase that if you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change.
Yes.
Literally, it's that case.
Yes. Yeah.
So you can look at an interesting example might be to give a social example. If there was a society of people and the men were in the trees,
Right.
high up, wearing silk and wearing gold, and the women were all on the forest floor, foraging for berries and wearing sort of sacks. We would come along and immediately think, well, these guys are very privileged and what they're doing to these women.
Yeah.
And then when you go to this society and you speak to them and they say, actually, what we believe is that being near the earth is actually a status, and eating from nature is the status, and these people are lesser because they're removed from that and they're kept away from the bounties. So what that shows is that what we understand as status is completely wrong, and it depends on what the people are thinking. So we can come at the same observation, two different conclusions depending upon your perspective.
Yes.
And that analogy applies to scientific observations as well.
Right. Okay.
So if you look at the data, depending on who you have and what preconceptions they have, they may come out with different conclusions as to the reason why this might be. Okay. And this is why science is really social. It's a social thing. And unless the social thought about what can be and can't be changes, or how we can approach this, the science won't change. Yeah. So there's a great book, The Structure of Scientific Revolutions.
Okay.
By Thomas Kuhn.
I'll take a look.
I recommend it.
Yeah, thank you. Gentlemen, it's been very interesting. It was lovely to meet you both. Thank you ever so much.
Are you originally from England, or?
So I'm originally from Wales, funnily enough.
From Wales.
Yes. So
Your family's like.
So my mother is English.
Okay.
My father is Welsh.
Okay.
And my granddad is Irish. So I've got quite a lot. Bit of a mixture, absolutely.
Going on there.
But yes, so come far for a good debate, but.
Well, I think more than debate, it's nice to have
a discussion. Absolutely.
I think a debate generally means that we sort of stubbornly hold our ground, and we're not willing to understand each other where we're coming from, which is, I don't know. I don't find those very productive to me.
Well, much like what's probably going on over there. But I've really enjoyed it, gentlemen. It's been great. We do need to shoot because we were going to go get some lunch, but it's been
enjoy your lunch.
It has been fantastic.
Enjoy your lunch. You have a lovely day, guys.
You take care, both. All right. We'll see you again. Bye then.